Hello ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new New World video. Today we're gonna be taking a look at my firestaff hatchet build that I've been using in order to dominate 1v1 small scale fights but also large scale fights over here on the Fresh server. Now just as a disclaimer before we get into it, this is 2 days playtime, so basically servers are just released, the gear is not gonna be perfect, however I will describe to you the perfect set of gear that I would use once we reach the later stages of the account. Every single piece of gear that you will see in this video was obtained either through the balloons or on the market for less than 1000 coins a piece. So a lot of this gear is extremely cheap or obtained through the balloons. If you don't know how the balloons work, I made a video a couple of days ago where I explained what to do as a fresh level 65. But TLDR, all of it is obtained in Cutlass Keys, whether it is by doing your daily Cutlass Keys quests or by looting chests in the PvP zone over here on the bottom left of Cutlass. That's not what this video is about. This video is about this build because I get asked so many times on stream to showcase it, so this is my showcase. And this build heavily revolves over the fact that we are utilizing Inferno. The most important passive about this weapon is the inner power. If your strength attribute is higher, replace your base weapon scaling with strength. 15% damage when you hit a target within 15 meters. So close range, big damage. Think about it that way. It also has good perks in Keenly Empowered and Vicious. I'm thinking about putting the attunement on it as a last perk at the moment. However, there is simply no matrices on the market yet. Again, this is Fresh server, there is not that much availability. And when it comes to hatchet, I basically got lucky on my daily pool, got a decent hatchet, and that's why I built my entire build around this hatchet. Now the hatchet isn't perfect, but it has good perks and it deals a ton of damage. So it makes the job for me very easy to build the build around it. However, I originally planned on playing firestaff SNS, but again, this is my best weapon, let's make a build around it. The gems I'm currently using on both of my weapons are Cut Pristine Emeralds. That basically makes it so whenever the enemy is under 50% health, you deal bonus damage and you also heal. Now in the future I do plan to replace these with rune glass versions of them, so basically still emerald but with the fire tick rune glass, eventually once those come to market. Another alternative that I could potentially play around with is to simply put a ruby in my hatchet to split damage into fire damage. Now you may be wondering why would you do that? And now we come to armor. Every single armor piece that I wants to have fire harnessing on it. Now you might be wondering why is this guy playing more for fire? Well, that 2% bonus fire damage is not maybe very noticeable, but once you start adding rune glass and once you start doing that on every single piece of armor, the damage increases by a whole lot. And that's also where the idea of ruby in the hatchet comes into play. This is gonna require further testing once we actually have, correct rune glass on the server. As you can see, I'm still using tier 4 gems at the moment. But I gave you a little sneak peek on my gear, so let's go over it. My ideal gear would be fire harnessing, freedom and thrust conditioning. Now you may be wondering, that is very odd combination, and for most people that would be an odd combination. However, I do really enjoy for freedom. Now, for somebody that is more solo player oriented, something like fire harnessing, shirking heals could be very good with a solid third perk as well. But this early into the game, you're basically looking at fire harnessing and then any useful perks that you can find. In this case, we have health. Health is not a bad perk, is not a great perk. We have refreshing. Refreshing with this build is decent, but definitely not mandatory. I would rather take defensive perks over refreshing, but for the time being, we have to take it. And we have another body right here, which is a strength in spec, but look, it has basically the same perks that I need. And later on, when we go over the attributes, you'll see why a piece like that is actually quite decent for this build. Moving on to gloves, these are my doubloon gloves. They have absolutely no perk that I want. They're high gear score, they need to be replaced. We are in a fresh server, it is day 2. However, what would I want here? Again, fire harnessing, probably freedom, and one of the defensive perks. For most people, I wouldn't even bother with freedom. I would just go 2 defensive perks with fire harnessing. And most of the time, this is gonna be the most realistic option for you. Attunement pants, again, I plan on putting fire harnessing on it. Once again, we don't have armor matrices on the server yet. And my boots, these are also doubloon boots. I landed them on fire harnessing already. I'm just running with them. Physical aversion isn't the best perk, we'll take it. Refreshing isn't the best perk, I'll take it. It's the best I got. I'm at the moment only utilizing the regular vines because obviously very expensive to make those into the brutal. But once these are legendary, I would go with brutal vines. You could go with brutal detonate. You could go with a bunch of different things. When it comes to jewelry, it is a little bit all over the place. But again, we landed on a nice doubloon amulet here with alchemic reprieve lightning protection health. Now, instead of lightning protection, something like fire protection or slash protection or thrust protection would definitely be better, or perhaps something like a stamina recovery would also be pretty decent. But this alchemist reprieve seems like a pretty decent option. 10% bonus healing from potions, that also works on your regeneration potions, seems like a pretty decent perk. Moving on to the ring, I have a little bit of a disaster ring here actually. Once again, a doubloon craft, we got a hearty sacred bloodletting, basically just hearty, really. But it's the best we got at the moment. What would I want instead of this? Something like fire damage could be very good, or something like slash damage could actually be very good. Because this build, the power of it is the fact that people can't really protect against you. If they have fire protection, they will die to your hatchet. If they have slash protection, they will die to your fire. And that's where the beauty of this build comes through. And now when it comes to earring, 700 year score, another doubloon craft. It landed on Dex Int, but it has 3 perfect perks. So we try to utilize this into our build as well. And when it comes to jewelry artifacts, viable artifacts for this build would be Endless Thirst, Ankh Amulet, but only in cases where you're playing strictly with a pocket healer. I would stay away from Blood Drinker because it lowers your damage too much. And very early on into account's progression, you could consider Lost Stopwatch or a Phoenix even. But I guess out of all the options, Endless Thirst just seems like the best option, or Amulet of Ankh if you're playing with a healer. Now, of course, if you were to have perfect stats, and this wasn't day 2 of the fresh servers, the stats I would actually want to go for is 350 strength, 50 dex, 50 int, and then 152 constitution. Because then, with a plus 48 constitution food, you would get to exactly 200 con. So I think this build shines when you play 200 con, 50 int, 50 dex, and the rest strength. You can only really achieve that with attunement pens. Obviously, if you start changing your artifacts when it comes to your armor, you might want to just play no dex, no int, everything strength. It is for sure doable, but this is what we got this early on into the game. And of course, whenever in the future we do any major changes to the build, I will probably update it or re-record this video. But let's go over the passives, why this is so good. By reaching 350 strength, your final attack in a melee chain deals 10% damage plus abilities. Like, it's just a big damage increase. When it comes to 50 dexterity, you get bonus damage when you're at full health, and when you're fighting from a distance, that's pretty noticeable. Alongside a little bit of an increase in your critical hit chance, alongside that your hatchet deals bonus damage as well, because hatchet scales of both dex and strength. And then lastly, we pushed for 50 intelligence, 5% base damage increase to targets inflicted with DOT, meaning with firestaff, they're always under dot effects, always plus 5% bonus damage, and on top of that, we also get bonus damage to backstabs, which happens a lot with Hatchet actually. So all of these passives come super nicely with the Hatchet, but again, if you do not run attunement pens, and if you do not have the split attribute stats when it comes to your armor, you could justify just not going dex, not going int, just 152 con, and the rest strength. That would probably work perfectly fine as well. But this is what I have success already with, and the build is nowhere near perfect. Now, for the people that are going to be the most excited about, let's talk about weapon mastery. So weapon mastery is a very important thing when it comes to this build. We're going to start with Hatchet. Hatchet does not have that much variability. I think this is the build you really want to go for. The reason for Infected Throw is you can easily deal with healers by yourself when you combine Infected Throw with Vines with your burst, and we try to utilize all the passives. So after 3 successful light attacks, we get Empower. The cooldowns are reduced when we hit an enemy, when our health is low. We also increase our damage by 10% for every enemy within 5 meters, but I just had an observation, and I'm starting to think that maybe I should have taken the Enraged Strikes. Now, I don't usually suffer from executing people under 30% health, so maybe you can play around with getting rid of Desperate Refresh and putting it in Enraged Strikes, for example. We want to take all the points in the Raging Torrent. The final blow makes this very strong, and we definitely want to take all the perks down in the Berserker tree. Of course, Defy Death, super important. You literally do not die. When it comes to the right side tree, we take the Critical Throw. That gives us a few more crits. We also take the rejuvenating crits, which gives us a little bit of stamina. We also take the all attacks, deal 10% damage against people with an active debuff, which happens often when you use Infected Throw. And we also take Adrenaline Rush, which gives us a lot more mobility, a lot more dodges. Super important ability to have. When it comes to Infected Throw, you have to reach the aerial transmission as well. This is the important part of it. And I wouldn't really change this too much. What you could do is get rid of Raging Torrent, put it in the social distancing plus Infected Throw. But honestly, the Raging Torrent deals so much damage, I wouldn't really replace it. So I would stick with this page. The one thing you can do is get rid of Desperate Refresh, put it in and Rage Strikes. That's about it. But now Firestaff. This is where you can start honestly cooking. This is a viable page I'm playing around with. You can lose a couple of useless passives and put 2 more perks in the burnout as well. If you're playing large scale PvP, you can also completely get rid of burnout and put it in the Meteor, Shower, Fireball and Pillar. That's gonna be your turbo pumping build. That would look something like this. This is the type of build I would personally take into something like a war, or maybe if you really want a stat pad in an OPR. You could even cook something different with Flamethrower as well. That would also be an interesting option. However, I am not a big supporter of a Flamethrower because if you're close range, you wanna be using Hatchet. If you're long range, you wanna be using Firestaff. I wouldn't really rely on Flamethrower that much personally, but you could make it work. I would stay away from Incinerate. I think it's just a straight up bad spell. So I would either rotate between this page and the page I originally showed in order to find what you're comfortable with. But just for the sake of variability, let me show you the other possibility as well. This would also be one of the pages worth running, but what I actually started preferring is to not really take this heat up part and not really take this all-in part and utilize all of the effective damage boosting passives alongside Let It Burn and alongside Haste actually, so I can chase people down a bit better. But again, you can get rid of these two, you can put it here, you can get rid of something like Clear Casting, put it into the Haste if you would like. You can mix and match a couple of passives when it comes to Firestaff, and all the possibilities are actually gonna be good possibilities. Just to prove a point, I'm from now on gonna play with this page for a little bit. When it comes to consumables, you really are looking into your Honing Stones, Desert Sunrises, Roasted Rabbit with Seasoned Vegetables, that's gonna give you your 48 Constitution to push your Constitution to 200. And Hearty Meals, that's gonna recover your health every 2.5 seconds for 40 minutes. So all of those are basically the food buffs you're gonna be using. When it comes to your inventory, you're gonna be using health potions, regeneration potions, and then sometimes mana potions. However, if you play the build correctly, you will not have a lot of mana problems. And then some sort of a protection, whether it's gemstone, whether it's oak flesh, whether it's fire absorption. You get the idea. Alright, now you have a good understanding of your attribute distribution. Again, to remember your mind, 350, 50, 50, 152 con. You have a good understanding of your gear. You wanna have a double defensive perk with fire harnessing. You have a good understanding of your weapons as well. You obviously wanna have Inferno with this build, with probably attunement. And you want to have some strength weapon with high gear score. Again, you can play this build with Hatchet, with SNS, with anything strength scaling. You could play this with a Great Axe if you happen to pull a Great Axe. All of that would be super viable. And when it comes to jewelry, obviously focus on good perks, but also focus on high gear score. The balloons are gonna be your best friend. Keep rolling, rolling, rolling until you finally land on some actual good jewelry. And obviously the last thing that you want to take from this is the rune glass choices. We currently don't have it, but you either want to use Opal, Diamond, Onyx, any defensive cut pristine gems. My server doesn't have them yet, but usually you want to have somewhat of a balanced setup with both physical resistance and elemental resistance. But do not look at my resistances too hard. Once again, this is very early on into the server. Now, I would love to go around and show you the spell rotations when it comes to this build, but it is very self-explanatory. Let's pretend this lamp right here is my enemy. When we are on the distance, we just wanna utilize the terrain and get our left clicks in. Obviously, a lot of heavies are important with the Firestaff. What's important is also that you try to create burst windows. How do you create burst windows? As you're attacking players within the fireball and pillars at the same time. So you can create as much damage in a spike as possible. What you can also start doing is heavy, dodge light. It's not exactly an auto attack cancel, but when you're chasing someone and you chase them like this, the dodge roll animation is also shorter. I missed it there, but you get the point. So heavy, dodge light, heavy, dodge light, heavy, dodge light. And what you can then do is you can do heavy, dodge light, and ability. Okay, so heavy, dodge light, and ability. Right? And once you start getting comfortable with those, you will see how much more spikes you're now creating compared to before. Right? Because if we are slow and we're hitting, and now we're hitting, and let's say the enemy is sitting in like it has like a healer. Now we throw a fireball, we miss a hit. Now we throw a pillar, we miss a hit, right? And we just don't create those spikes. But when you start mixing heavy dodge light and ability, that is gonna be now 3k plus like 1k plus like 3k damage, all in nothing. And then if you wanna get like really good with bursts, right? You're gonna go boom, 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 and then you can also pair it with the pillar afterwards, right? I kind of always suck when it comes to talking and doing a combo. So let's do like a combo that would be like a nice long range spike type of situation. So it would be just hitting, you hit a few hits, nice, boom, boom, and then bam. You see that pillar dropping, that fireball dropping, pardon, and that pillar hitting at the same time. That's what's going to create those spikes. That's what's going to create those kills. Let's say the enemy is running away. Pop a little ding, boom. Run after them, you know, switch into your thingy. Now you have berserk stance, you chase them down. Once you get a few left clicks on them, they get slowed because you're hitting them in the back. Once you land your first hit, dodge forward and torrent. This, they are not gonna be able to dodge out of it. At least 2 out of 4 hits are gonna hit. And then you can, if they're sitting on the sacred, you create a disease, right? And you can just hit them through it. And this combo has super great chase potential, super great kill potential, and also amazing survivability and mobility, right? Survivability, mobility. I'm making rhymes out here. But let's say I'm getting in a sticky situation, dodge Zerk, and then you utilize the mobility, movement speed, health regeneration, and invulnerability in order to utilize your potions and whatnot and get out of a sticky situation. Super, super good build for both 1v1s and even large-scale PvP. And as if this build wasn't like the jack of all trades already, you can fight big clumps with it, and you can fight like outside of fights with, right? Like outskirt fights, right? But this all depends if you're playing Burnout, so this would be more for outskirts, and if you would be playing Meteor, it would be more for clump fights, right? Meteor on the clump, pillar on the clump, a fireball on the clump, you get the idea. People come to you, oh, now you're fighting them with a hatchet. Okay, and I think that's pretty much covers it. If you guys want to see this build in action, drop by the live stream. I'm streaming every day, over 8 hours, literally every single day. I would appreciate you to join the stream. I stream both on YouTube and on Twitch. Be there, ask questions. I try to answer just about everything. I got over 8,000 hours on the game. I'm knowledgeable about just about every build in the game. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, give the video a like. Consider commenting. Let me know if you're testing this build out. And I'll see you again in another video. Have a good one and bye-bye.